Hi, everyone, and welcome to our weekly AI talks or interviews. Today we have Dennis with us. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he has built and exited four companies as a founder. He's a recognized leader, author, and university instructor in the field of analytics and AI. Dennis is originally from Denmark, currently lives in New York. Did I get it right, Dennis?
Good enough.
Good
You are
enough. Okay.
too kind. You could just
Uh,
have said, here's a dude I think might have done something we should take a listen to. So thank you very much.
Definitely. Yeah, so let's start with how are you today, Dennis?
I think I'm almost in control. So
Yeah.
we sold the company last year. We just finished up the kind of traditional post-merger integration, and I am this close in getting started on the next venture. And as I'm sure you're all aware of, the beginning is kind of a scatter plot, right? Until you figure out exactly where you're supposed to sit on that particular map. But I'm
Yeah.
good. The answer was yes, I'm good, I'm happy. Things are moving forward.
Awesome. So let's start with to just understand a little bit. So as I understand, you are into AI and analytics overall. So, how did this journey start for you? Like, if we go back as long as possible, like when did you discover you had a interest of this field?
Good question. So I have a computer science background, so probably similar to many of the folks listening in. And I originally really had the idea that I would just kind of get my degree, being from Scandinavia, go work for IBM, have my kind of 7 weeks of holidays, leave at 4 p.m., and the whole thing would just kind of be wonderful, at least in my mind. And I ended up right out of college getting attached to this idea of doing log file analytics. So today it's obvious that any website doing anything, even your personal blog, you have a little bit of analytics attached to it, as in, hey, who's coming by, where they're coming from, did I buy some of these people? If I did, what did they do? Did I get a good return? All the kind of usual questions of running anything on the internet. It was not as obvious in the mid 90s, it's not as easy. So I thought there might be an opportunity to take, we don't really do much anymore, but the web server log files that are being spit out and turn that into insights. Of course, what is this? October 2022, everything's in real time. And we even click refresh if it's a couple of seconds delayed, as in there must be something wrong with this app, as in what's going on. We would process this over many weeks, as in receive huge amounts of data that couldn't really be transported over the net on CDs, load that up into a server farm, and then do the analysis and send back our insights. So that'll be kind of a round trip of 3-4 weeks from getting data to actual insights. So spent 5 years trying to extract as much meaning from that particular data set. And that was kind of the beginning. And it might be a story I tell myself, but most of the ventures, so we've done 5 ventures over the last 25 years, spending about 5 years on each on average. And they've always been rooted in the idea that or at least we believed, we found a unique data set for where we could extract some particular meaning. And sometimes you extract meaning all the way up into the application itself, and sometimes it's somewhere in the middle. But that was the beginning, extracting meaning from web server log files. However geeky that sounds.
Yeah, it sounds really geeky, but really cool. So, you guys at the time you built your own system that was operating on a server level, so to say, to be able to extract this information.
Yes, we did. We ended up by pure luck, so I shouldn't pretend that I've seen anything, but we ended up selling the company in April 2000. So I was one of those kids where if you talk about the dot-com boom, I think it was a wonderful time because I got out right at the top. Like NASDAQ at that moment was just on the other side of 5,000. So it was just perfect timing, but not something for where I had a picture of the future. It was just good karma. We ended up in our third venture, actually, just on that theme, where we're now in the kind of 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8s, and you can start to dream of real time. And to kind of make that happen at that moment, and again, I'm going to sound really old in this chat between you and me, but at that moment, and you probably still remember, most of your disks would be magnetic, and you kind of spin that around, and there's a whole set of kind of optimizations which you can do, or really a whole set of things that you are finding hard to do because of the kind of mechanical setup of a magnetic set of disks. But at that moment, you could still kind of retrieve enough data for where you could fantasize about real time. So we did something very similar to Google Analytics. That company ended up being acquired by Yahoo, ended up being Yahoo Analytics. We actually got acquired 3 months after my friend's Urchin, who got acquired by Google. That app is obviously still in production today, but we did some, and I'm patting myself on the back here, but some really nifty technology. So we ended up writing our own file system, which nobody does anymore, but you can optimize, at least for the particular purpose, your file system to what you want to do, because a general purpose file system has all sorts of kind of overhead for you and me to kind of do the things we want to do on our Mac or PC or Linux, wherever you're kind of at. But you can remove that overhead if really all you want is to retrieve data in certain sizes, chunks, as fast as possible. So we wrote a file system, and just, I'm going to go all geek, but we wrote it in such a way for where usually when really any file system will read things in chunks of a certain size, no matter the size of the file actually. So there'll be a certain kind of overhead, and it will have no consideration to the kind of amount of chunks on a spin. So we would, buy the hard disk, have that chunk be one spin, so that when we need to read the next chunk, we don't have to. If you're kind of halfway around, you have to kind of do almost half a round before you can read the next chunk. So we wrote the file system so that there was no delay. You could just keep spinning and reading, and did almost a 2x on what we could extract. So did that, and then we wrote most databases. This was before you and me can install Mongo tonight on some EC2 and get near real time. Not so much a decade and a half ago. So we wrote our own database. And most databases today, whether you're kind of Postgres, SQL-like, or Mongo kind of document-like, is somewhat row-based, right? Select so-and-so from whatever customer table where first name equals Dennis, but it's still kind of scanning rows. In analytics, you're actually surely interested in rows, but more interested in columns, because you're summing things up. So we wrote this column database that was just very good at summing up things, because if you do analytics, it's really, CNN get 2 billion views a month. I need to kind of sum up page views or sessions or visits or events or conversions, whatever it might be. So we wrote the database, and then we wrote our own query language. And with that, we ended up with a 7-second latency, which at that moment in time was just a staggering event that hadn't really been seen before, and lived on that and ended up running it for 5+ years, and it got acquired by Yahoo. But just an amazing story to kind of make that happen. Sorry, went all in on that. This is turning into a little bit of a mini history lesson. Sorry.
No, I love it, ideas you came up with, and the solution built on top of it sounds really smart. So I can really see like this a bit of this very analytic and actually finding out a potential solution and applying it that way. So what happened after this? If we just fast forward a bit.
I'll give you, yeah. So after that, we did a predictive analytics venture for media, where we came up with this algorithm where we could predict the performance of a story about a half hour into the future. And the way we did that was that if you look at any destination, so some of our customers would be CNN or Fox or ABC or Le Monde or The Guardian or Time and so on and so forth. And if you go to, say, CNN.com, you look at that homepage, or really a section, a homepage like the political or sports section front page of the New York Daily News, that's really a marketplace where you just happen to own all of the positions. Just like Google is selling the right-hand side at auction, where there's some value in the position itself, then there's some value in what you put in that position. It's not just a matter of the value of the position, which is why you can sometimes still be number one on Google while paying less than number two if you have a high converting ad. But we figured out a way to map that out, treat the homepage like an internal auction where you are the owner of both kind of the auction itself and the content which you place into it. Because if you do that, then you can look at some story on some obscure section front page that are getting very few views if you're optimizing for views, and say, hey, this is surely the 17th most viewed story of the day, and it's not really in our top 10, but it's outperforming its position. If you put this into the hero, this is what it would look like and what it would translate into. What that meant we could kind of remap what you should do against certain objectives. An objective could be like to make more money. I said, I'll take less views, but on a high value category. I just want to do max views, or I want a certain distribution of articles given who we are. Say you're the FT on a single day. That was actually, footnote. That's one of the hardest optimization problems, which is that this is always easier to optimize for the short term, especially when the short term can take advantage of things that hurt the future. So on the FT, any kind of lifestyle type story will do really well in the short term, as in today so-and-so is getting divorced or slept with so-and-so, something that you read in People magazine. If you put that on the FT, in the moment today, it'll actually do quite well. If that is all you run, then the FT is not the FT anymore, and you actually end up hurting yourself. So figure out, what can I do now that surely will win me in the moment, but won't hurt me in the long term? It's just very hard to kind of figure out. But we did that for 3 years, ended up being acquired. It was a very nifty setup. Obviously needed to happen in real time, given some stories come and go over tens of minutes, sometimes hours if it's the story of the day, sometimes 2 days, but then it's long gone, right? That story never comes back, and you have really just a constant cold start for where every story is new. Like there's nothing for where, this good piece of content from last year, which we know a lot about, we can now use. No, you can't. We wrote the story 12 minutes ago and you know nothing, Dennis. Obviously you have some dimensions you can attach to it, like category, author, time of day, kind of some dimensions, but ran that and had that acquired. And then probably the theme for the day, we got started on this AI scheduler and a company called X.AI back in 2014, where we thought, and it's the same for every entrepreneur or really any data scientist, that there's a moment in your life where you think, I can go wrangle not language as a whole, given that's an unsolved science, but I might be able to carve out a corner of the language universe and I'll be the one to solve it. And then you jump into the pool, you figure out this is not a pool, this is the ocean, this is fucking cold, there's way longer to the other side than I imagined, I'm probably gonna die, this was a mistake. But we jumped into that and figured out all of those things as we hit the water and built this agent, almost kind of, I wouldn't say opposite to, but certainly in contrast to the Siris and the OK Googles and the Alexas and so on and so forth, that are very kind of horizontal. You can ask them anything like how old are you, what time is it, play a song, and so on and so forth. But they can't go very deep, as in they can't really do jobs, they can do tasks. So we thought we could do the opposite, or in contrast, do this kind of verticalized AI that could only do one thing, but do it extremely well and go very deep and think of it as a job where there would be multiple turns. And as soon as you start to take multiple turns with any agent, the universe kind of almost explodes in what you can do, right? And even worse, if you're taking turns and you rely on past predictions, your 99% very quickly turns to something much, much lower as you start to kind of multiply that. It's kind of like a self-driving car, for where a lot of the predictions on what you do now is based on what you did a millisecond or a second or 2 seconds before. And we worked that for half a decade. And I think in the end, kind of nailed the product design for it. And we figured out a ton of stuff. Love to talk about that. There's just so many things which we learned along the way. And we ended up being acquired on that company last year. But building agents, which I thought, which was incorrect, would be more dominant. I actually thought the conversational UI, if you think of that as a UI paradigm on its own, would be more dominant. I thought you and me would be talking more to our computers, and talking not just in voice, that could be in text as you type it, and voice turns into text almost immediately anyway, but I thought that would be just more dominant. A lot of people thought that. You saw bots everywhere, like on Messenger and on websites and what have you, but it ended up being not as dominant, and we haven't really seen it fully arrive just yet. I'm still a believer, though, that is the future, because it seems like it's the last step towards fully democratizing access to compute, where when I took my kind of CS degree, we did it on the command line, and that was the only interface, and that excluded pretty much everybody but programmers. Then the next step was some sort of basic graphical user interface for where perhaps my mom was real education, could get access. My kids grew up on the kind of mobile UI, but it looked like if you can speak to it, the last of the folks who didn't yet get access, not as in get access, as in fully being able to utilize the power in front of them, might just see that happen with the conversational UI, but it didn't play out like that. But it was a very fun journey. I had a good outcome, but it didn't turn out to be the agent that I originally imagined. We can talk about why that is, both on what people want, and I would say most of our footnote, just to give you some sort of a scope, we had 101, there's a reason for that, people full-time sitting doing nothing but labeling, just labeling data, because we thought this would be a supervised learning type environment for where we would perhaps be able to craft this unique data set. And that was just a labeling team. And then a team of, at some point, 25 just raw data scientists, talk nothing of the kind of machine learning engineers behind it to kind of run the infrastructure. But it's just a staggering size of the operation to try to make this agent, but it was very fun.
Yeah, I can imagine it must have been a interesting journey trying to get that to work a bunch of years back. Exactly what you are saying is a lot what we believe in. Of course, we believe in different technologies in AI, but lately, especially the last 2 years, we have seen a lot happening in especially transformers and a lot of increase in capabilities, especially around text. Of course, we have images and videos and everything coming now. I believe that OpenAI did open source and released something the other week just called Whisper. I don't know if you heard about this. So basically, it's a voice to text transcribing but it is extremely good at doing this, and it can even handle somebody speaking Spanish with it, and it will transcribe into English on the back end, so you can get all your system working there. And we see a lot of people starting to build quite amazing stuff nowadays just by being able to take a part such as Whisper, connecting that to GPT-3 or Codex and a couple of external sources, and what you are saying about the UI, we believe extremely much in also. So
so obviously infinite number of things you need to think about if you try to not just fool around with the latest kind of model that you fell in love with. And there's certainly some really sexy stuff coming out, and it seems like it's almost kind of accelerating, or perhaps we're just on a kind of reasonably steady curve, but it feels like an acceleration of late. For where even as an insider like you and me, you're a little bit kind of dazzled of what you see, like, we're already here. I had an idea of where we could end, but today I thought that would be kind of multiple years out into the future. Just a few notes to what you said. If you want to productize some of this, I'll state the obvious here. And it should have been obvious to me early on as well, but it was not as obvious, or I didn't take it as serious as I should have. There's at least two types of products. If you want to be kind of very black and white, there's a bucket of products for where they require very high accuracy to function as products, for where any incorrect prediction is not just an incorrect prediction, that is probably the product not being able to exist in market. We can go back to that self-driving car as a kind of easy example here, for where hitting 1,000 pedestrians in Manhattan on a weekly basis might just be as good as any human driver, but might not be able to exist as a product, just of all sorts of kind of reasons in society. We figured out the same even in our own little kind of mini versions of that, for where setting up a meeting, there's no meeting almost set. Either I turn up today or I don't turn up. There's no, Dennis, you tried and you did a good job and we appreciate that. No, you just missed the meeting. And I didn't fully appreciate that either the product would work at extreme high accuracy. Footnote, not just our own studies, there's some good external studies on this as well, for anybody kind of interested, where there's typically an expectation of higher than human accuracy when you do human jobs as machines. Meaning that I thought the human personal assistant, if I could outdo him on kind of certain parameters, easy ones like response speed, obviously much faster, other dimensions, knowing and memorizing all time zones at any moment in time. Of course, easy for the machine, but then you start kind of going to other kind of territories. And the expectation was not that, if you can be as good as Tom, you're doing fine, Dennis. No, we want you to be superhuman. And that meant the willingness to forgive, which is what I've seen the most papers on. The machine was just less than your willingness to forgive the human. One of the papers I read was on stock trades, where they did a machine set of stock trades and a human set of stock trades, and the willingness to forgive your broker was just higher on something where there's real money at stake, and we just sat in the same territory. And that is just an interesting kind of territory to kind of be in. And we spent most of our time in the kind of latter set of years in trying to figure out, how can I either flip that or move the responsibility so it's not me, but yours. And when I say yours, could that either be the guest or the host? So the host is our customer who kind of deploy the agent, and the guests are the kind of participant in the meeting. We figured out certain kind of product design elements that helped us move that ever so slightly. But it was just a dangerous kind of place to be in, for we would have these mistake then almost near churn. Like I could do 78 good meetings, I fuck one up, I almost lose the customer. Just very hard to kind of be in that space. That's the one part. Just a note to kind of what you said. The other one is the reverse, right? For where any kind of recommendation you do, any prediction that you can extract from your system is of value. It's just a value add. And that could be, or you're kind of in the low accuracy kind of territory. So that's low accuracy, which sounds rude. That's not the point. The point is that Spotify doesn't need to run at high accuracy. It just need to run at accuracy good enough for where I'm not going to turn it off, for where the next song on the radio is not a complete disconnect. And if you just do good enough, well, the radio continues to play, right? Or Google search results. It doesn't matter whether 1 and 2 are kind of flipped around. I'll probably stick around. So there's plenty of kind of solutions where you can survive on low accuracy, or you can turn it around so it becomes a value add. You upload a picture, you need some sort of identification of who's in the picture. If you pick out 3 out of 5, this is a 60% accuracy, that might in one system be completely shit, not usable. And in another system, well, that's a value add. I don't have to do 3 of them. I'll take it. Thank you very much. I think next time I'm doing anything, I want to be in the bucket for where anything was to do, people will thank me for, versus the opposite. You missed 2, and now I'm not going to use it. I'm going to tell everybody not to use it either, just like very hardcore. That was one note. The other note, which is very interesting, when you said on language, we found, so two parts of the system. There's the part for where I'm trying to do some sort of intent prediction. What is it that you want me to do here at this particular turn in the conversation? You know, schedule a new meeting, you're running late, adding participant, make her optional, extend the duration, so on and so forth. What is the intent of what you're trying to tell me? Then there's some entities like temporals, you know, today, 1100 hours, and there'll be some locations on Discord, Zoom, 15 Broad Street, and some people being attached to it. So that's the 3 kind of main entities. But as we did that, we figured out a way to go from one language to all languages in one step. So we originally imagined that we would probably have to go label due to all sorts of reasons, like local customs on how you talk about meetings, and me telling you we should really get coffee one day in the US means that we are not supposed to get coffee, but it's a nice way of saying you're a good person. If somehow the stars align, we could get coffee, but it's not a request for the machine to go out and schedule a coffee meeting. So there's all sorts of things where we thought we would have to kind of go label in German or Spanish or Danish or what have you. We figured out actually another way, which was that we would end up with this internal scheduling language, which we could just translate imperfectly. It didn't matter. As in, we would just take all of our training data and just translate it. Didn't even write our own. Just use any one of the kind of services that you have out there, and you would look at the text and they say, okay, kind of like when you do a Google Translate on a website, where, hey, I get what's going on here, but obviously if somebody wrote that as a human, that is just poor content. But hey, I get the gist of it. We could translate that whole corpus with poor translations, and then do predictions on that, because it was really first translated from English to German to a scheduling language. And the degradation from poor German to scheduling was almost nil. Because really, the gist came across very well. So it's just one of those moments where we thought we could, but immediately 1 to 68 languages kind of overnight, based on the same kind of training data set, simply because we were not making predictions against the language itself, but against a kind of extracted scheduling language. And it just didn't matter really that the quality of the initial kind of incoming language was kind of human poor, because it was machine good.
Thank you so much for that explanation. Yeah, super interesting. I even actually remember when you guys was launching X.AI, I believe, and it was like a email scheduler, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you would
So
email the agent, natural language. Hey, Amy, can you get me and Dennis together sometime late next week in the afternoon for half an hour on Zoom? Make laney optional. And in my kind of Danish English grammar, we were supposed to be able to extract the meaning of that, and actually ended up doing quite well on it, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of meetings being scheduled all the time. So ended up getting the volume, but it took way longer than we expected.
yeah, I can imagine that, and I would say personally myself, I was not a big believer overall in the NLP space for a long time, basically due to the massive amount of variables you will end up with in the end. What really changed my mind was when the GPT-3 came out and started to try that out a little, and of course GPT-3 have improved quite some since it first was released. But such a system today allows basically anyone to build really complex classifications or understand what something is about. And we see there people get combining this with, for example, the OpenAI Whisper. They take this, they take some data source, maybe they take some sort of visualization, and suddenly over 48 hours we see people building almost revolutionary solutions. So that is something that is really cool. I would like to pick your mind and understand a bit. So you have been in this space for a longer time than probably most people listening to this. And as you were saying, it feels like things are accelerating. Where do you believe we are, say, in 5 years when it comes to computers? Do you believe the user interference is the same as today, and how we use computers overall?
Good question. And whenever anybody asks you anything about the future, whatever you say, it is guaranteed that you will be wrong. So it's just really an uphill battle to suggest anything, because at some point you might stumble upon a comment of your own from the past thinking, how could you be so wrong? But at the moment, it felt like you could see some path. A few notes. So those were the disclaimers, right? If I meet myself later in life and see this commentary. One, go back not that many years. Even today, from some angles, the belief was that the people in danger, if you kind of looked at society as a whole, would be folks in blue-collar jobs. I said, what do we do if we end up with mass employments? I said, all these factories, which might still play out, will be run by robotics in some way, shape, or form. But that might have turned, and those, I wouldn't say in danger, but certainly in danger of being affected, needing to figure out what to do next or how to kind of add value or apply human ingenuity, is people in white collar jobs. As in, there was a time where if I want 17 unique images for this kind of content library of ours that we're about to push, I would most certainly need to hire some artist in some capacity. Might just be somebody good at Photoshop, or might be a straight out artist that can actually craft some original art. Today, though, we are bordering on me just being able to craft that myself on some good prompts. As in, not so disconnected to something I couldn't use. Well, those are white collar jobs. So that's just the first note for where I am keen to see what happens when the very people we thought would be affected the most might be the ones affected the least. As in, there'll still be a server at the diner down the street, and that is not really looking like that will be replaced anytime soon. And hey, we are even kind of in a shortage of having enough people to do those jobs. But people, you and me, and our cousins, will perhaps need to go out and reimagine what they did, as in sitting all day long doing, stick to the prior example, certain types of designs, Well, your job might not be pushing pixels, but coming up with better prompts. And I do think it's not one for where you might disappear. You might just become a different type of designer, but it might also be that we're replacing one segment of humans with another segment. It might just be that is not true, but it might just be that I actually have a really good design sense, but I didn't have the kind of mechanics or the raw skill to kind of output my imagination. It just could be that I'm the better of whatever pool of engineers or artists because I'm just very good at entering prompts. So that is certainly a prediction of a future where I think we'll see a reshuffling of the experts in white-collar jobs. That's one part, and not just on art. Art is kind of a very kind of wide description. Could even be text, video, images, all sorts of things, right? So that is certainly one prediction, and I think it's an exciting one because my hope is that people who felt excluded before, just like any other moment in kind of computer history for where we excluded a whole host of people for where, well, if you can't program, you just can't use this. And then later, okay, we'll have kind of no code environments. Yeah, but it's still not for my mom. But hey, my mom might just have good ideas or some way to resolve a particular pain of hers, but she's not going into a no-code environment. As in, we might call it no-code, but for her, that is absolutely code. It's not like she's going in and say, hey, you can actually just put 5, 6 different SAPs together, and it could probably solve your problem. Not happening. Now, that's one prediction. The other prediction is, and I'll probably keep saying this forever until it's true, there must be a moment where agents arrive as co-workers to us, where if you come into a job blank without having a set of machine agents helping you, that would seem naive, as in, what? Matthias, are you just you? I thought you would have these agents behind you, which you train to kind of work with you so that you're not at 1/10 the speed of your co-workers who do have these agents. And it just seems inevitable to me that they must arrive at some point in helping you along. And I'm not suggesting we're looking for some sort of Jarvis-like outcome, just specialized agents doing specialized things, which one day, perhaps in a half century, turn into that kind of Jarvis-like thing, but just specialized agents. That I do imagine. I know I took a bet on it and I just can't let go, and it might just be naive, but that I can see. And when I say agents, I then assume the way to instruct these agents are through natural language in some way, shape, or form. As in, you want something done, or you can see a job so well described that the agent can do it for you. Almost like what you're starting to see in factories, right? Where you get general purpose robotics that you then train to, say, paint a chair, right? It's actually not a chair painting robot. It's just a robot for where you can train it to do certain motions to paint this particular chair at this moment in the kind of line. And I think that will kind of happen here as well. Then we will also kind of cross into, just across the board, a territory where we will not know whether certain outputs are human or machine generated. Today, it's almost immediately recognizable. It's something as basic as going onto a support site, and if there's a chatbot, I can tell you instantly whether that's a machine or a human. But there'll be a point where certain terms on that support or certain outputs of some text extract that you needed or questions you might have, that might be machine generated and you don't know. And that'll give us some sort of interesting implications of whether, at least initially, do we care? Does it matter? Who's the owner? Me now, because I was the one who made this particular output occur, or is it the kind of software backdrop who spit it out? Like all sorts of things are going to kind of happen when we cross that inflection point. So that I think will happen probably sooner rather than later, where I am even borderline unsure when I look at some of the outputs whether that was human or machine generated. But I think it'll become just so blended. But I think we'll then need to have some sort of ideas of how to handle that moment when that happens. Then, lastly, stating the obvious. It's very hard to argue with algorithmic output, and you might suffer because of it. You and me might just be attached to all sorts of things where we don't suffer, like bloody Spotify, that's a lousy playlist, or Google, come on, we move beyond keywords. I described what I want you to tell me. Why are you just giving me a set of page? Like all sorts of things where there's no kind of negative impact. But there's certainly all sorts of places where there's real impact. That I'm not so sure we fully solved, and we talk about that as explainable AI. We're not seeing much work, not much good research on it just yet. I think that could be a real moment of contention for where we'll get strong pushback if we don't kind of get ahead of that. Where, again, the obvious examples, right? Go apply for a credit card. Move to the US, Matthias. Try to open a bank account, apply for a credit card. I will tell you, that's going to be an uphill battle and you will be declined. But you know what? Not only will you not know why you got declined, the guy at the bank might not know. So we can take a good example here. I was helping my daughter, who just started university, to apply for her first credit card. Because the US is very kind of credit score based. Back home, being Danish and all, the whole thing is based on an ability to assemble savings. So the opposite. So we're in the bank and we try to kind of answer the questions honestly, as in she will have no income. Why? Because she's going to university. And there's just some sort of algorithmic output on 3 tries the bank couldn't help with, for where if you have no income, you can't get a credit card, for where I'm obviously sponsoring her. And then in the end, we figure out a way to, we, meaning me and Citibank, figure out a way to overcome the algorithm by injecting her some income, which is really the allowance that I give her. It's like, that is me knowing about how the system works, but even I kind of struggled to kind of overcome something for where the very people who relied on it couldn't really understand it either. So a few points on the future. And then there's all the unknown, right? We'll be dashing on something we just couldn't even dream of, right?
Yeah, no, I think everything you say makes a lot of sense, and truly believe and also see a lot that just what you said, like we are lowering barrier of entry for people that want to create startups, and we're also lowering barrier a lot to use certain tools. So say such a thing as Photoshop. I guess all of us at some point wanted to do something in Photoshop, but we don't know the command specific routine to make that happen. But if we at least was on such an expertise level that we could explain it to somebody else, then I believe, like technology-wise, we are kind of there today. Somebody could build this. We just need people that start to think a little bit different, and maybe how can I combine a couple of AI systems to create something really smart that does something without say the user, the operator need to have the knowledge, like the command specific knowledge. So that's probably something that are going away pretty fast, because it wasn't enough to be an expert. We also need to remember every single command, and it is basically two different things.
Exactly. There are 2 different things, which is that really, if we stick to the kind of designer analogy here, for where some will just have a really good design sense and also be really good at the mechanics, If you compare those two, you start to see these spectacular outputs. But you also see some designers where they're good at the mechanics, but not necessarily the greatest designers, and you get these kind of bland outputs. Not bad, because they still know the mechanics and can kind of use some of the rule sets. And it's going to be interesting to see either who of these people translate to the other side, or is it a whole new segment? And I'm sure anybody kind of listening in here have fooled around with Copilot from GitHub. I actually fooled around with it so much that I'm paying them, what is it now, $10 a month or something like that? In one part, mostly so I can show other people how awesome it is. And perhaps it's just because I'm from a programming background. My daughter is doing software engineering in university as well. The very kind of standard set of subjects you have to kind of go through based on kind of what we've done the last many decades. But writing a good comment or good function header might actually be worth more than you being able to write the function in the not too distant future. As in, that is just very amazing on two fronts: on whole new code, but also on let's call it autocomplete. So there's surely autocomplete on some objects and what have you. You might get that from your code editor, and that's all kind of nice and nifty. But I'm talking about the I know already what I'm about to type. And then I'm not talking autocomplete. I'm talking about after this line, I just need to type it out, and they just get it so right on kind of local variables, kind of local conditions, like just, dang, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. Still some kind of obviously glitches here and there, kind of scary on the type of errors that you introduce, because it looks almost correct, but it might have something that's a little bit off, and that might take you the next kind of 5 minutes to figure out why was that? Oh, yeah, you did this. But I'm just very impressed with it. But I'm thinking, does a new type of people actually arrive who's just very good at writing comments and function headers, but not code? Because if you can do that, you might actually just be a better programmer.
Yeah, it definitely require a different type of approach when writing code, I think, to be efficient with it. But what you also see, like those extra 5 minutes you put on actually going through and fixing your variables and so on, that's fine, because you just saved 30 minutes on getting a base of the function to work. And, we see people building today, taking, once again, getting back to the GPT and codecs and stuff, but for example, just a voice system that allows anyone in the organization to just ask a question about data they need, and the system will automatically execute SQL query, pull that up and show it in a nice graph. And now suddenly anyone can access this information in a matter of seconds, instead of needing to go to somebody on tech department that's going to tell somebody else, and then that need to make it way back. And
so what you describe, I actually think is a very astute version of what will happen in the near future. So today, if you want to do any meaningful analysis of whatever data set, you need to go to either an analyst, a data scientist, or something similar. And if you look at people in support, just across the organization, you're almost scolded if you send in a request for where, hey, you can't just willy-nilly send these requests that you dreamt up as part of some sort of support thing that happened, because these people are expensive. And you almost discourage people from doing that. But, well, who's to say that people further up the top will have the best questions? And on that, just footnote, today, the most valuable part of most analysis is the answer. As in, you are being rewarded for the answer. I ask you, so we spent $100,000 on AdWords on the West Coast last month. How do they convert compared to what we do in Europe? Kind of some sort of question, marketing question. And some analysts will kind of take a look, do a deep dive, and come back and be rewarded for the answer. Because it takes a little bit of skill to use whatever BI solution that you might use. Well, what you're suggesting is at some point, the answer will come either cheapest or at no cost. As in, you can just ask anything and get an answer. And now if the answer is of no, obviously, it is of value, but crafting the answer is of no value, then the question is the most valuable part. And today we're actually not rewarding people really for good questions. Sometimes we're doing the opposite, as in scolding them for spamming the organization with questions where, well, we should be rewarding good questions. And now we'll see perhaps certainly if not a flip of the organization, certainly a very hard bend on who sits with the best questions. It might just be that the people closest to the customer, like tier 1, 2, 3 support, which we might be paying, less than other folks in the organization, might just sit with the best questions because they have a very intimate relationship with customers and product. Like, I find that very interesting once we start to see the very shift that you just described.
Yeah, definitely. And personally, for us, like we are spending quite some time and just implementing this kind of systems in our day to day. So regardless if it's like writing an email or answering social media comments, or I simply need an email address from somebody in the company, I can access these systems very easily through whatever communication channel and simply ask it and get it. So it's really like shortening down the process, and it will be interesting to see those organizations that really embrace and start to implement this, and those that doesn't do it, and how much that will play in. We are a little bit over time here. I could have continued talking with you for a long time, and we would love to have you back at some point to maybe talk a bit more specifically about one of the subjects that you are expert on. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. And do you have any last words, something you want to promote, and maybe some encouraging words for our audience? Because currently now we have, I think it was 3-4 days ago, 1,500 people that basically building on this new building block. So it's really interesting to see what they're able to accomplish if you give them the right tools and the right building blocks. So yeah, the scene is yours.
I would. That's an open canvas for me to go wild. But two things. One, I would, in kind of any recommender or any set of predictions or any kind of output of whatever kind of algorithm you put in place, at least allow yourself to spend enough time on the actual product design around it. For you might just craft something good, but it dies on poor product design around it. As in, we solved plenty of our challenges, not through increased precision and recall, but through slightly different product design. So I would not escape that. Allow yourself enough time on the whiteboard to think, well, the prediction is good, perhaps not great. Well, the product can still be great if you craft the right environment around it. And you might not forever spend the next half year trying to increase your precision and recall to get to some moment where you think, if that's just high enough, I will win. So allow yourself that part. That was one. The other note, I am one click short of starting my next company, launchbrightly.com. We're going to do automated product screenshots, trying to extract from within the application a set of collateral that you can use. If one day it rains outside, you're on the second diet code, you should check it out. End of advert.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dennis. Super interesting to hear about your journey. And yeah, let's redo this at some point soon and talk a bit more specifically about stuff. So yeah, thank you so much for taking your time and being with us today.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Bye there.
Take care.